For the Rebbe, not for an instant, not for a moment was it about him. It was always about us. There's a famous story of a great Chabad rabbi. It's a true story. I'll share it. It's a sweet little story. Maybe it's not so sweet, but it's a great story. This is a true story. I heard it from the Chabad house, the Chabad rabbi who knows these people. There was a guy, the world is full of nudnikas. You speak Yiddish? What's a nudnik? There's a nud and there's a nick, and then there's a nudnik, and then there's 40% nud and 60% nick and 10% nud and 90% nick. People try to figure out what's the nud and what's the nick. The combination is obnoxious. Nudnik is obnoxious. There was a guy who was a nudnik, and of course he was obviously Jewish. I mean, how could you be a goyish and nudnik? Nudnik is a yid. So this guy had a shtick. His shtick was that he hated all clergy. He never met him, but he hated them, right? They got to be bad, right? Organized religion, the source of all evil. So he had an agenda. If he ever got word that there was a very prominent member of the clergy, made the difference if he was a Jew, if he was a Christian, if he was a Muslim, he'd find him and he'd nudnik. How do you nudnik? You go to a crowd full of people and you put yourself in a good position and you stare at the guy. You stand in front of you, stare at him. So this guy gets up and he's all bedecked with regalia, and he's all looks very pious and holy, and you look at him and he makes eye contact with you and you intimidate him. So he had this shtick that he would go around whenever he heard of a prominent person who was presumably representing God. It was his job to make him uncomfortable. He'd come very early, he'd get to stand right in the front, and he would stare at the guy until he'd throw him off his game. And he came to 770. In the 1980s, he heard about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He came to 770 with the intention of getting under the Rebbe's skin. He came to early, got a front spot, and the Rebbe walked in, and the Rebbe did what he did. Then he turned around, and he faced the audience, and he started to speak, and he's staring at the Rebbe. And the Rebbe's looking around the room, and at some point, the Rebbe turned and looked at him. And you know what happened? The Rebbe turned and looked at him. He looked away. I can tell you this personal experience. You could not win a staring contact with the Rebbe. It was impossible. It's looking into the sun. Listen, you don't got to believe me. You really don't. But it's the God's honest truth. You could not look the Rebbe in the eye. The eyes were fire. So he looks away. He said, oh, this is not good, right? So he said, okay, next time I'm going to get him. So the Rebbe is looking around the room, and eventually the Rebbe's eyes settle on him, and he looks away again. Yeah. And he finally decided that, I guess there's rabbis and there's rabbis. There's rabbis that you can intimidate, and then there's rabbis that are rare, that are real. Right? The Rebbe is one. He's one. But he saw holiness, and he never forgot it. So he remained a nudnik. He didn't stop being a nudnik, but the Rebbe was on his good list. He's real. So years and years later, he lives in Malibu, Chabad in Malibu in California. So a Chabad rabbi came to speak, and this nudnik was there, and he was doing his thing, and the rabbi was brilliant. He was a very good speaker, and he made a great speech. In the middle of his speech, the nudnik says in the back of him, says, Rabbi, I want you to know, you're terrific. You're a great speaker. You have so much to say. Your delivery is extraordinary. You're engaging. You can make a stone wake up and listen. But you got to get out of the way. We want to hear the Rebbe. You gotta get out of the way. We came here to hear the Rebbe. We're listening to you, not because you got a nice tie. I'm not wearing a tie. Because you're a good orator. We came here because you're a representative of the Rebbe. We want to hear the Rebbe. And it's interesting. The Rebbe spoke Yiddish in a monotone. The Rebbe was not engaging. He was not an orator. The Rebbe never tried to be interesting. He spoke from a perspective of royalty. The Rebbe spoke very slowly, and his words were very measured, and his tone was very constant. It was boring. You had to really be interesting. The Rebbe did not try to win us over with his oratory. He said truth, and it was hard to follow. But you were taken by that truth. But the point, and the interesting thing is, all these years later, in a Chabad house, any place in the world, you put on the Rebbe and people say, I like that rabbi. You don't understand what he's saying, right? People are drawn to the Rebbe not because he's such a great speaker or because he says things in such an engaging way. It's because it's truth. And I want to go back to my point. the Rebbe always got out of the way. In every relationship that the Rebbe was involved with, the Rebbe got out of the way. It was never about him. It was always about you. It's kind of interesting. He was the head of this movement, and he did not want to take away the space of the people who were doing their work. He wanted them to fill the space, and the Rebbe should sort of be, if you will, in the background. That's how the Rebbe was, that's how the Rebbe is.